or whether it was a practice that could help me as a witch. A lot of the resources I found were written by well-meaning Christians that all said God has a plan. Well, I just quoted Tori Amos and said, I'm going to give Judas a try. And then a lot of things I read or practiced with Buddhists were like, well, God doesn't have a plan. And my thought was, well, then what the hell's the point? So I needed something that came from a witchcraft perspective. We do not need systems that fit all. Okay, we are never going to be a one-size-fits-all path. We're not supposed to be. We're the wild renegades that run off into the woods. That's who we are. So we do not need systems that will fit all of us into it. But what we do need as witches is we need options. We need options for how we can address grief. And we need to have these ready for one another for when grief inevitably hits, so that we can have these metaphorical, magical elixirs to offer one another. So, some of the things that witches need in all of their spiritual practice, but especially when it comes to grief, is flexibility. Okay? It is not a one-size-fits-all thing. It's also important to remember, so thinking about when either you yourself or someone in your community, when grief hits, personal, mental, and spiritual resources are hard to come by. A really serious grief, going to your altar, sitting down and meditating, lighting a candle. What is that? Showing up and casting a circle? Huh? Attending, that is when everything falls apart. But that is when we need spiritual tools more than ever. But the regular things are not going to work. And trying to push ourselves into our normal ways of practicing our spirituality is going to be impossible, if not just very, very disappointing. So, being aware of some practical options to suggest for other people, and therefore also to have in the back of your mind as options that you can embrace when grief eventually happens, is helpful for the person to get back on their feet. In the Jewish traditions and cultures, when someone has a serious loss, the community just knows what to do, and they show up with food. And most of the food is already basically prepared, not just groceries, but not just fruit, but fruit that's already sliced, meals that have already been prepared, so that the person who has been hurt, who has lost, does not need to think about food. They don't need to reach out and say, well, my pantry's a little bare right now. They just can sit and be sad, right? So we need to find some ways within us in the magical community that we can know how to show up for one another without being told. Okay. So, when an individual in our community loses something, first off, think about the practicals, the four walls of what the person in your community. So let's just say, for example, you found out that a covenor has lost their father. Okay. Let's first think about what they need. Probably, let's check in on them with some food. Show up with a meal for their freezer in a Tupperware container and just stick it in the freezer. Know what their food sensitivities are. So say, for example, this person can't eat dairy. So you're going to send out an email to your community and say, listen, guys, let's get 7 meals in Jenny's freezer right now. But remember, she's lactose intolerant, and she has a kid who cannot eat bell peppers. So let's make 7 meals that do not require dairy or bell peppers. Okay, we're just going to show up and we're just going to stick them in her freezer. She's not going to have to ask, that kind of thing. Checking in on housekeeping. Jenny, when do you need childcare this week? Okay, it's different than saying, let us know if you need anything. The grieving person does not have the resources generally to ask. Okay, give them the opportunity to say no. Say, no, we're good, thank you so much. But say, listen, we can set up childcare for you this week so you can do what you need to do. Okay, walking the dog, taking care of the animals. Do you need us to take your dog for a couple of days? All right, do you need us to, can we organize and get some and do some stuff for your yard work? All right, would you be comfortable with us either coming in and doing some cleaning for you before all the relatives arrive, or do we need, can we pool our resources and you can hire a house cleaning service whenever you want? We can pull some money together and give you a DoorDash gift card. Start with the 4 walls of making sure the grieving person has what they need. Treat it like an injury, okay? And witches, we've got to avoid cliches. Avoid saying the cliche things. So many witches, unintentional, and again, I'm using the term witch because it's the broadest term. I understand that not everybody here identifies as a witch. But so many of us basically parrot the same things that Christians say, which is unhelpful. The universe has a plan. They're always going to be with you, watching you. They're in a better place. They're in the Summerlands. Okay, this was part of destiny. These are horrible things for a person who's grieving to hear. And the only reason we say that is because we, the person who's not grieving, want to fix it, and because we also want it to be true. We want there to be a method behind the madness, and that's just not the case. Friends in the back, is my volume still okay? Okay. All right. So one of the things that witches, we revel in the idea of mystery, but we tend to abandon the concept of mystery when someone loses and we start looking for answers. Whereas, very sad to say, most of the times things just happen because they happen. Okay, if y'all attended my Dangerous Goddess class yesterday, you heard my theory that the gods are not completely in control, which is a terrifying thought. Then who is? Oh, that's the mystery. Right. But if we are to appreciate the mystery, then let us appreciate and celebrate the mystery when it really matters, which is during a time of loss. And not try to create a story which is really just going to harm the person who hears it. Now, if that's what that person wants to believe, that's the story that they've chosen to comfort themselves, awesome. If they want to believe that there's a divine purpose, that this is destiny, if that is what is getting them through this time, great. That's not for us to argue, but it's not for us to put it on them either. Okay? We must be very careful about how we offer messages. All right? And I'll admit, I've been guilty of it, where you really believe you've got a message from the deceased person for the bereaved person. It is devastating for a bereaved person to, first off, to get some kind of message that's probably not accurate, but why are they coming to you and they're not coming to me? All right, there's a a widow of a very famous witch, I'm not gonna say who, came to me in tears and said, I'm so tired of strangers reaching out to me saying that my husband came to them with a message. If he's coming to these strangers with messages, why isn't he coming to me? Right? It is a very, very painful thing to hear. Same thing with unsolicited tarot readings. Oh, yes. Yeah. Trigger warning, mention of child loss. After my first miscarriage, I had somebody reach out to me with an unsolicited tarot reading about my situation. Mm-hmm. I believe this person had me confused with someone else, and then she goes, but I've read for you so many times, and I'm like, no, you haven't. But also, how dare you? Yeah. And she tried to put a really happy spin on the reading, and I'm like, I know what the Tower of the Death card means. Please stop telling me it means transformation, in my experience. I'm going to get there in just a second.
It's so funny you mention that, because when I was surrounded by a lot of Christians, that feels like Christians would come up. I got a reading for you. I got a message from Jesus. I'm like, did you really? Did you really? Yeah, it's just that kind of feeling.
Yeah, it's painful. And I've made that mistake before. So I'm not sitting here from a place of like, I've been on that side and I really, really wish I hadn't. I'll tell you what I did do instead most recently. Well, what I have done. I do have a very good friend who is now on the other side. And he shows up periodically in my life. He's a wonderful friend in the spirit world. When he shows up, I will sometimes just drop his widow a how are you doing message. That's all. I don't tell her I had a dream about him, that I had an encounter with him, but I just say, just thinking about you and the kids, how's it going? That's all. And then if she decides to open up to me like, oh, I've been having this blah, 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 then I know I can, but she's never done that. She goes, oh, we're doing okay. How are you? I'm like, okay, great. Well, I hope to see you soon. That's it. Most recently, a friend of mine lost his partner of 10 years very suddenly and was just absolutely devastated, for understandable, obviously. And I had a dream that I was in my spirit. I have a spirit space that I go to in my dreams, and I've been there a lot lately, and that he was there with her, and they were just totally chill. And I was pretty sure it was a visitation from her, but I kept it quiet. About 2 days later, he texted me saying, I've had this dream about her, and I just need some help decoding it. I think she's with me, but I don't know. And then I said, okay, I do need to tell you that I did dream that she is with you, and that she's at peace. I did not bring this to you because I wasn't sure if that was a message you'd be open to. But since he came to me, looking to understand his experience, but I did not make that initiative. Okay, if you want to try to quote unquote prove it or have some document it, write it in your journal with a date. On this date, so and so came to me and said this about their bereaved person, and put it aside. So that way, if the bereaved person comes to you and says, I've been having a lot of dreams about my dad, and then just to say, I just want you to know this, I had this dream. And they may come to you and say, next time come to me and let me know. But then you've opened that. But do not plop yourself in a situation and be like, I have a message for you. Because most of the time when people come to me with messages from my deceased people, it's not them. I can tell right out. And it bothers me, that concept that they think it is. Right? So let us not do that. And again, if you've done it, I've done it, don't be hard on yourself, but let us remind this is not how you support a grieving person. But you can write it down and you can date it so that if the opportunity presents itself, you can be like, this is what I've experienced. And that can be very healing for someone, but it has to be on the grieving person's own terms. Okay. So healing is a subjective, individual process. Okay. In my book, Sacred Tears, we talk about there are no stages of grief. Most of us know that at this point, that Dr. Kubler-Ross's model was actually really misused, but we still seem to try to apply it to ourselves or our people closest to us, like, gosh, they were angry and then they weren't angry, now they're angry again, what is that? I mean, to me, the grief journey is far more a spiral than a line anyway. When we're trying to help someone through their grieving process, we're not here to help them get over it, okay? Because there really is no getting over a serious loss. The loss changes you, it becomes part of your story. And there will be a time in which you have a new way of being. In some cases, the loss can make us even more in love with life after a certain point, but there is no getting over loss. There is simply changing and adapting to it and finding a new path. And we can't force, and also if somebody seems like they are blocked from their grief, we may feel like it is our job to try to get them to feel something. Like, well, it's time for you to really focus on your grief. It's time for you to let it out. And if they're resisting it, let them, okay? It's not for us to have people get over something or force them to feel their feelings or force them to feel their grief. Our goal as members in the community is to provide an empathetic container and witness to them as they grieve. When a grieving person they get very frustrated with themselves. Like, people must be so sick of being around me. I'm no fun. I'm a drag on everyone. Our goal is to say, no, you're not a drag, and I'm not tired of it, and I'm just glad that you're here, right? And to show up in that way for the grieving person, okay? Also, especially those of you that are leading covens, groups, circles, do not try to be a therapist unless you are a therapist. And even then, see them in a clinical setting, okay? If you are a professional therapist, you may find that you may bring attributes of your work into this place. Do not make yourself their therapist, okay? That is not, we want to keep the lines clear, right? Okay. Magic is not a catch-all. Pay attention to this both in yourselves and in other people. Magic cannot replace therapy. Magic can be therapeutic, but magic is not therapy. Beware the person who's in grief fires their therapist and starts showing up to every full moon circle because magic is helping them more than therapy. No, they need to go back to therapy. Still come to the full moon circles or find a new therapist, but magic is not therapy, even if it can be therapeutic. Magic can also be supportive, but magical groups are not support groups, okay? We have to make sure we know specifically the identity of the role of our group and what our group is there for. It provides a magical container for people to navigate this path of being human. It's not a support group, it is not therapy, and it cannot try to be, even if elements of it are therapeutic or supportive. This is how it quickly can eclipse into codependency and even cult-like mentality, right? We have to be so mindful of that in our small groups because it's hard not to be, right? We're small, we're close, we're friends, we're not really, I don't really know anybody who is a paid, like, full-time priest or priestess within the community. Okay? And so it's very easy for these lines to blur, but that is when people can get hurt. And then honestly, magic is sexier and more fun than therapy or a grief support group. It is. It's more fun. It feels good. You can slip away from things. You can start to create that. But then it denies the person the ability to heal. They start hiding from their healing within their magic. They start hiding from that within the coven politics and stuff like that. And the grief just grows. And then you can start to have problems within your own coven itself. Okay? So, magical practice can support an emotional or physical healing journey, but it cannot replace an emotional or physical healing journey. Okay? Right? So, I'm going to go to one. Actually, let's stop real quick for a second and take some questions. If anybody has questions, thoughts. Yeah?
I just want to say thank you for everything you said so far. It resonated so much with me. That questions, just want to say that. Thank you.
You're welcome, and I'm sorry.
I get that.
That's the thing, people say, I loved your grief book. I'm like, I'm so sorry to hear that you had to read it, but I'm glad that you liked it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally resonate with what you said about, it's hard to show up for yourself when you're grieving. Like, I've been going through a grieving process for the last 2 years, and kind of like a side, consequence of it is a lot of my magical practice has, fallen off, because it's hard. I'm like, I know magic can help, but I'm like, this is not what I need. And when I'm grieving, it's hard to, find a way to hold myself, like sit at my altar, do this self-care ritual and all that. So, I want to say thank you for making it okay, but it's still something that I'm like, well, I wish I knew that then, I wish I did that then. I'm just like, okay, it's okay, and I'm glad I'm here. Because when I'm in that mood, I'm just like, okay, I have a framework I can help myself.
Mm-hmm. For those who maybe didn't catch that, it's talking about how difficult it can be to maintain a magical practice in the wake of grief. Did I get that right?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's therapeutic, but it's not therapy. I know it can help, but when you're so depressed and grieving, it's like hard to even like light a candle or anything like that.
Well, I'll tell you why I believe that's true. I believe that's true because I believe that magical practice is a reflection of ourselves at that moment in time. And when we have a loss and when we grieve, we change. So our needs change. Okay? So it's really not fair to expect that we would be nurtured with that. For example, go back to my toddler, right? So a year and a half ago, she was nourished by milk and pretty much only milk. Now she lives on graham crackers and applesauce pouches. That's pretty much it. But it would not, are there elements of milk that still are appropriate for her? Yes. But it really wouldn't make sense if I was just like, how come this milk no longer nourishes her? She's not the same. And it says, honestly, it's the same that with us when we're grieving. Our magical practice was supportive of our journey before that loss. We're different now. We're different in the wake of loss. I will tell you for myself, and I've written 3 books on deities, and I'm sure there will be more, although I'm not ready to commit to them yet. I've been a deity-centered witch for most of my life, but after my loss 3 years ago, I was really struggling to even connect with the concept of gods. And my journey has come to a place where the gods have come back to it, but it is not what it was because I'm different. So my spiritual needs are different. My spiritual needs were for a very long time, it was pretty much about gods, and then after my loss, it was all about the only spirits I trust are the plants. I only trusted plants for a very long time, and then I started to trust the spirits behind the plants, and then I started to trust my ancestors. And then, after a very long journey, I acknowledged that there may be the existence of gods. But that took a while. But it's the gods never fully went away, but how I approach them is very different. So how I approached them before would just not be appropriate. I'm not who I was before my loss. Other questions before we continue? Yeah?
Sorry, just another acknowledgement. Same thing, I'm going through a very deep grief as well. And I just wanna say what you just said is just like touched me because my relationship with my team, sorry I'm gonna cry because it's like so true. It's like so different now for the grief. It's just beautiful what you're doing, especially in the community.
Yeah.
This is all true.
Yeah.
Because it alters you, and you change, and this transformation is beautiful, but at the same time, it's a very, very harsh lesson.
And there's its own grief there as well.
Yeah.
Like the grief of the practice that used to work for me, and now there's it's like, great, another loss on top of that.
And so much of this community is love, light, look at the positive, but especially as witches, we go so much into the shadow, and so much of that work is solitary.
It is.
So you're right, when it came to loss and grief, I'm just like, I have no support.
Like, you feel alone,
Yeah.
even though your team says you're not alone.
This friend here had a comment, and then we'll come back to you.
Just real quick, I'm a chaplain and a pagan and a male, so I inherently want to fix everything when that.
Thank you for your service as a chaplain.
So what I found works best for me is probably 90% of what I do, because I deal with grief and loss and everything every day that I'm in there, is just hold space. That's, you know, real quick, I went in to see a patient and I said, you know, can I do anything? She says, I'm not ready to do anything. She says, I am in too dark of a place. I said, well, so would it be okay if I sat with you in that dark place? And I sat with her for an hour and I didn't say anything and then I left. And I saw her the next day and she says, thank you for doing it. Don't fix it, it's not broken.
Yeah.
Just give them the space here.
Well, this friend, and then we'll come to you.
Well, and that's a really good segue. I am a therapist.
Oh.
So many identities in common, one is slightly different. So I am the therapist, and I think your point about, like, yeah, magic is sexier than therapy, but it's not therapy. But it can be therapeutic, and I work a lot in the intersections of those things, because for me, and a very dear friend had to point this out to me, that therapy is the ritual that I do every day, because I do it every day, I do it every hour that I create a space, and it has all the same, it has all the elements of ritual, just with different meaning ascribed and a different presence. But I find myself using that as a container for people more and more. It has the similarity that sometimes all you can do is sit in the darkness with people, and we are not taught to do that, and being able to do that and offer that to your people in their grief is incredibly powerful. But also, I find myself reminding folks that when they're in that space, okay, you don't have to do the big ritual, you don't have to light your candles and reset your altar. What's the tiniest version of a ritual you can do? It may not even be like capital R ritual or really a ritual by whatever your standards are, but it's the ritual of taking a shower. It's the ritual of keeping yourself alive for another day. And if it gives you meaning to put it in terms of your practice, and that helps you do it, that's getting through those times.
Yeah. Moment to moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, Courtney, I feel like when you're talking about this, in the way you're talking about this, it's just taking all the pressure off. And I think that pressure comes from the larger systems that we live in. Like, so if we're grieving, we can be, and that's enough. And then if we are supporting, we can be, and that's enough. And like presence, like what our chaplain and therapist have said, like just taking the pressure off of all of us, you know?
Yeah.
So, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to move on to the other slides, and we'll have more time for questions at the end. Okay? Great. The search for closure. The big C word. So, closure is an important part of the healing process. It also, the search for closure gives the grieving person a point of focus. We as humans are deeply curious creatures, and we desperately want to know why things happened. If this happened, I want to know why, right? And if we want to, and especially when something really devastating happens that's rocked our world so much, we want it to have a profound meaning attached, okay? One of the challenges with closure is that it is not an object that we're going to find. It is not some truth that someone's going to relay to us. Closure is, I talk about this as a closure is a story that we come to accept as the reason for why something happened. A lot of Christian traditions try to create that for their people by saying it's God's plan, it's Jesus' plan, you're not supposed to know, as a good Christian, Catholic, what have you, you're not supposed to question. And so then they can just provide that closure for that person. And I think that that is a truly cruel thing that some of these religions do. Again, not all Christian traditions do this, but a lot of them do. And unfortunately, that kind of practice of trying to create closure for someone else, to try to put like a cork or a pin in that grieving process, denies the person the spiritual gifts that are found in the creation of closure. And I specifically say creation of closure, not the finding of closure. Because we don't find closure, we create it. All right? So, for example, a lot of times when somebody wants closure, it's usually after the end of a relationship. We really want closure with the person who left. Why did they leave? Why? I need to know why. Remember in Kill Bill Volume 2, spoiler alert, when Bill shoots the dart into the bride's knee and it gives the truth serum that makes her say exactly why she left him? The reason why that whole scene is so ludicrous is because that's not possible. We're never going to be able to really get the truth out of someone and find, I mean, that even if it is 100% the truth as to why they left, whether we like it or not, it's still on us to accept it as closure. Because we're the ones that accept whether or not we will be satisfied with that answer, or whether we're going to be like, no, I need to have one more coffee shop conversation. No, I need to get one more tarot reading to see if that's what they really meant. I want to know if that's what they meant then, or that's what they just told themselves. Like, and we start searching. I need to know more, because we believe, or that we're fed, that there is an objective reason for something that's happened outside of ourselves. Instead of the fact that most often, either there is no reason, or if there is a reason, we're never going to know fully all the details of why something happened. And maybe that's for the best. But closure comes when we create it. When we take the closure option out of the hands of someone else. It's like, when will this person give me closure? No, not when they give me closure, but when I have created it. When I have found a story that I can live with. Okay? Also, the risk of searching for closure, which is really important for us to both recognize in ourselves and also in other members of our magical community, is falling into the risk of obsession. Okay? You keep getting divination over and over again to find out why something happened. Or you keep trying to get messages from the divine or from the deceased person as to why something happened. Why? I need to know why, because no answer will satisfy, right? Because you believe there's got to be one other answer out there that I can live with. That keeps us from being present in our lives. It prevents us from healing, and it again gives away our power, because then we're putting that crucial part of healing in the hands of someone else. Now, I'm making it very clear, confronting an abuser, having a conversation with a former lover, having a conversation in circle with the divine, or having a mediumship session where you're getting information that is comforting to you, that can be part of the healing process. But still, at the end of it, it is on us to accept that as the story, to accept that as our closure. It's not going to come from someone else. And continuing to let it be in the hands of someone else is harmful to us at the end. So when you hear somebody say, I'm just looking for closure, support them to a point, but also remember that they say, this is closure you're going to create. It does not come from outside of you. And when you are finding it for yourself, you're like, it's going to have to come. It's coming from inside of me. Nobody else can give it to me. Even if they give me their reasons, even if they give me an explanation, it's still up to me to choose the moment that it is my closure. Also, I don't believe closure is a specific moment. I think it's a process, and it shifts. And what provides you closure now over a loss 3 years from now may no longer suit. and you find yourself revisiting the loss, and you need to find new closure, a new aspect, because you have also changed. You've had 3 years since your loss. You see it differently, it affects you differently, and you may find yourself needing a different aspect of closure on it. But it's still going to come from you. Even with all the information and divination and spirit messages from outside yourself, it is still on you to accept it as the story that you're willing to live with. Okay? Because the really horrifying thing is, most of the times, there is no reason for why things happen. That's terrifying.
And sometimes that closure will change every day.
Every day.
I have 2 parents with chronic conditions that they're just gonna continue to generate. And every week, every month, every hour sometimes, you lose something, you have to just close that. You'll never know.
Yeah.
You'll never understand.
Never understand. So, okay. So, with that, the creation of closure rituals can be a really powerful thing for people within the community and also for ourselves. So, for example, you can actually do physical rites that include closures, such as burning letters, writing a letter to someone and burning it, burying things, speaking to them while in trance or in meditation, coming into a circle and actually creating a moment in which you can have the dialogue and have the closure. I find meditations on the astral plane with people that I cannot speak to in person, either because they're deceased or because we just should not be in the same room. I find those very helpful, and or some kind of combination. But what I also will find is one ritual is rarely enough. Okay, it's a layered process. It's a process of unwinding. Some people get a lot done in one closure ritual and they're fine. But for others, it's probably going to take several. So be patient with yourselves and patient with other people if you or they need to do multiple rituals in order to get closure. Okay. Now we're going to talk about a little bit of mechanics here for if a community loses someone who was in the broom closet. This happened recently with someone in my community. They passed away, but they were in the broom closet. So I think their family had some kind of religious ceremony that was not pagan. And that was, again, another layer of grief for their coven because they wanted to honor them in their own way. But we have to be mindful and respectful of the individual's wishes. If they were not open to their families about their magical or witchcraft practices in life, it's not up to us to out them in the broom closet after death, okay? Let them keep that, let them take those secrets with them. And also, funeral rites are really not for the deceased, they are for the living. So even if the problematic or not, the family that is burying the person who's in the broom closet, they deserve to have rights on their own terms. Okay, so it is not for the pagans to come in and insist upon a pagan-themed funeral. Well, this is separate than if this person had left their last rites that need to be fulfilled. But if they didn't leave those, we cannot come in with our pagan agenda onto people who are grieving. What can be done is a separate private ceremony that would have been on the deceased terms. So another example. Very well-known witch passed away a few years ago, and she did leave very specific instructions as to her last rites, but there was one piece that was left off. She wanted a very specific service on Samhain. They did that, but she wanted a specific song sung, and for some reason it didn't happen. Whether the people that were organizing it didn't hear about it or didn't believe that that's what she wanted, and so some people were very upset that she did not get her song. So my coven came forward and said, well, we'll sing it for her at our Samhain. Okay, and so then we all just took a minute there and said, this is for, I'm not going to say their name, this is for their name, and we had an absolutely gorgeous raising for them. That was separate from that. So, same thing with a dear friend of mine. He likes being a ghost. Hey, Don! So, when Don passed away, I think that his family had a very, well, he didn't have much family, but I think they had a very, secular service, and I knew he was a big old witch. So, me and my 2 girlfriends went out and smoked his favorite cigarettes on the beach at night and told bawdy stories about him, because that was actually the kind of service that he would have wanted, is 3 young chicks smoking cigarettes in his honor on the beach. Yeah, I don't condone smoking, but he did. So, I'd smoke him if you got him, I don't care. I have a thing about tobacco at this point in my life. But we did not come enforcing our ways into his family, the service his family chose to have, so we had one separately for him. you know, he still shows up periodically. It's actually really, I think I can tell the story. No, I can't tell the story, sorry. I'll tell it later, at the bar, not publicly. Okay. Yeah, also offering prayer energetic circles for those who cannot attend in person. Okay, so consider offering, saying, hey, for those, if you could not attend this service, or this was not a witch line service, this was a Christian service, this is the kind of thing that people are not comfortable attending, here is a specific ritual we can all do, here's what you can say, here's what candles we're going to do, and we're going to recommend everybody do it at 2 o'clock Pacific time, and we're all going to do it from our parts of the world. That's what's really great about this global community of ours, and us belief in witches, and that, you know, our magic can cross through time and space. So that's another option. But remember that discretion is respect. Okay, we are not martyrs. We do not need to prove our faith. We do not need to wear our faith on our sleeve to prove that we are devout witches. That's between each of us individually and the paths that we walk, but we do not need to prove it to anyone. So especially those who are in the broom closet, it is not up to us to enforce a pagan ritual on them for our sake. Again, this is separate than making sure that their last rites are honored, okay, their last wishes. So, something that is really a big deal within pagan communities is there is a grief when a member leaves, okay? And I think sometimes we skip over that when a coven member leaves or a community member leaves, whether they pass away or more often because they move or they leave the space, there's often a lot of anger and it becomes infighting. To me, that is grief. We're hurt. Our feelings are hurt that our person left. It brings up for us, as much as I try to tell people it's not chosen family, people come and go. When you call it chosen family, you're immediately bringing up whatever family issues the person had from their youth. But that can exacerbate, like, I'm having a grief over the fact that my dad walked out of my family now that our high priest has left. I'm having these feelings that are coming up, and it can easily turn into animosity instead of recognizing it as grief. It hurts when someone leaves. So the grief of a community member leaving, even though they're probably still very much alive, is required. It's time you do need to heal from that itself. So I also be very careful not to rub the wound, so to speak. Give people a chance to say their piece, why they're sad, what they miss about the person, why they're angry that they left, why they're glad that they left. Give it some space for it, and then send it away. Okay? But then understand when you find that somebody is still maybe starting to get bickery with that person online, that we pause and say, I think maybe you're still sad that this is going on. Could you still be sad about them leaving? Could you give some space to that grief? Because we just don't need infighting right now. We do not need this kind of stuff. So recognize that. We tend to be really quick to move into, we don't like that person anymore, instead of recognizing that we're sad. Okay. So, I just mentioned that. Okay. Also, consider doing a working of releasing an energetic cord to let that person go. And if you can, try to practice intentions of compassion, what you wish for them on their new path, even if you're really, really upset about the way things went. This, I think, is really, really key to keeping our communities healthy, is by giving a ritual to the grief of somebody leaving the community. Okay. So, this is going to become more and more important to our communities as a whole over the next, probably for the rest of our lives. External events that impact a community. Natural disasters. Okay, our friends in Texas are dealing with it. I'm going to be in Asheville at the end of this week. I'm going to be with some members of the community that suffered from the floods. I've lived through 2 natural disasters, Hurricane Sandy and the wildfires in Oregon in 2020. And so I can tell you what I know from here. There's this moment where we all come together and we support each other, but the stress can make us really mean and stressed out. And people can turn on each other and start to become unkind. And that can really fracture a community, okay? And so we start to take things personal. We start to get angry instead of recognizing not only are we scared and we're tired and we may have lost people, we lost places that we loved. We've gone through something that's absolutely terrifying. And now we're taking it out on each other. Let's take a step back. Let's take a step and breathe, okay? There's also a grief that comes when communities have experienced natural disasters, of feeling forgotten, okay? It was really, really devastating to me during Hurricane Sandy We had half of our, I didn't even know if all my coworkers were still alive when I showed up at work. We all had lung infections. There were people that were in, high rises that had no power. It was just, I had covenanters that were stranded on the outer boroughs that they couldn't get back. There was no gasoline, you couldn't get anywhere. And for about a week, the whole world was focused on New York City, what's going on with us. And then as soon as the election started, everyone forgot. And I even had people say, is it all better now? I'm like, no, it's not all better. We're not okay. Things are still bad. It takes years, a generation sometimes, to heal from a natural disaster. If you go through this, please do not take it personally when the world moves on. It's unfortunately, we have very short attention spans, and if it's not in front of our faces, we're going to focus on something else. And in addition, because natural disasters are happening with such frequency, by the time people continue to focus on yours, then there's a new one to focus on. So it is not that people don't care about you, but it is painful. And so it's also important to remember that if you run across somebody in the community who, say, was from Western North Carolina or Eastern North Carolina, other areas there, say, how's it going? How are you? How are you recovering? Or how are you not recovering? Or what is it that you check in with that person? Because they're still going through it. Okay? All right. Okay. Some of the other risks of these kinds of circumstances is the recovery is so long and people get exhausted. You must pace yourself when you're going through natural disaster recovery. And I'm also going to say it, we are watching our democracy unravel. The fight to get it back, if we're able to, will probably last us the rest of our lives. This is a long-term thing. You're not going to be able to give 100% towards the cause at every moment. Sometimes maybe you can do 80, sometimes you're going to have to drop back to 10. But this is not just the ultimate marathon, this is a lifelong journey, and we just have to keep going. But giving 100% of yourself and burning out helps no one. And the gods are not glorified by your exhaustion. I'm going to say it again. The gods are not glorified by your exhaustion. We are not martyrs, okay? And of course you're all like, well, yes, but I am. It's cool for everybody else, but I need to give all of myself because I need to be worthy. No one. Okay. All right. Rites of grief for the community who have been impacted by something. It is not going to be a one and done thing. In the early days after the event, having toy drives or fundraisers or other supply drives can be really crucial into helping with community healing. People want to do something. Be really mindful, especially if you're working with a community outside, that you just don't show up with a bunch of supplies, that you are in communication with the people who are most directly impacted, so you are getting them exactly what they need. Unfortunately, it's like clothing drives and supplies drives can be so well meant, but I know when I was in Occupy Wall Street, I'll never forget, it was a very cold, very dry night, and this well-meaning man showed up, and we were actually, the camp had just been disassembled, and a lot of people were in jail, and I was doing jail support as a chaplain, and this well-meaning man showed up with a bunch of rain slickers, and he really wanted to help, but rain slickers were not what we needed. Okay, we needed bail money, and we needed space blankets. But here I am with this bag of rain slickers walking around with no place to put them. And I was like, thank you so much, sir, but now you've just given me something to do that distracts me from what I really need to be doing, even though what you did was so well meant. And that is a constant problem in some places of crisis. Guys, sometimes raising money for a local organization is the best thing you can do, because some of the things that are going to be needed are not things you're going to have in your house. We're talking like antibiotics, water sanitation tablets, diabetes medication. One thing that never is unneeded is diapers, both for children and adults. Because you can get by with one pair of blue jeans for a few days, but you cannot get by with one diaper for even a few hours. Okay, so those are some things that are always going to be helpful. But that's a way that people can also channel their grief, is by doing something about it. But also giving people space to heal their own fears and sadness about the loss of community spaces, okay? The loss of the grove, the loss of the area of the forest, that is painful, okay? And to feel like the earth is turned against us after everything that we've done to love it, right? Also, check and make sure that either you or other people are not saying, well, someone else had it worse. You know, yeah, I lost my house, but somebody else lost their house and their whole family. Who am I to cry? Always have it worse. All right, when I stub my toe, that is some serious pain. It is nothing compared to the person who had a car run over their leg and they lost that leg. I mean, seriously, which is nothing compared to the person who had a car run over both their legs and lost both their legs. There's always someone else who's had it worse. But that pain is real. Stubbing your toe is a real pain, man. You know, so it doesn't mean that even though someone else has suffered it worse than you, honestly, that's just skipping the grieving process. You're like, I don't need to grieve. I don't need to grieve. Someone else had it worse. I'm fine. No, honey, you're not. Okay? All right. So, consider, before the disaster, consider partnering with larger groups such as religious or social organizations. Even if you may have your own issues with some of the Christian churches, try to find some progressive ones, because not only do they tend to have more structure and resources, it is really important right now more than ever to build important bridges across religious divides. Okay, this current government is singling out different religions as terrorist organizations, and honestly, witchcraft and paganism is on the list, I'm sure. So we need to be partnering, even if we don't agree with their beliefs, we need to be partnering with larger organizations. One of the things that I was so grateful for is, even though I have a lot of complicated feelings about being involved with Occupy Wall Street, because I was involved as a chaplain at Occupy Wall Street, I had relationships with progressive chaplains, mostly Episcopalians and some United Church of Christ. And they had cars and money, and this was their full-time job, and so we were already on the same text threads. And so when they were actually loading up their cars and going out to Staten Island, other places where relief had not yet gotten, I said, well, we've got our Samhain ritual coming up, so we'll get your paper towels. So we had, because they needed paper towels. And so I had every pagan show up with a roll of paper towels. And the next morning they showed up, and of course, because it had been Samhain, I'd been up till 4 a.m. I still had my hair and horns and makeup on my face, and there's an Episcopalian minister knocking on my apartment door, and I'm like, I got your paper towels. You guys want some mead? And they were like, thanks. We should have gone to that party. But then, okay, that was a way for us to help. They had more resources, and we could show up with paper towels. So, and also having emergency plans in place for community ahead of time. Who in your community is needs an oxygen? Okay. Who in your community needs electricity to power their wheelchair? Who has children who are neurodivergent? Okay. Who's going to need help first? Who in your community has the big truck? Right? Who can drive around and get people the things that they need? Relief organizations will help, but they don't always help for a couple of days because they have to get organized. If we're already organized, then we can address needs first, okay? And then when we get tired, that's when the big agencies can come in and start helping and take over a shift. And then the big agencies will eventually leave, and we need to have our communities ready to come back in. So build these communities and build these plans ahead of time. If you're part of a larger pagan organization, consider having an emergency task force, okay? Something we're doing in Oregon right now is we're preparing for this really big earthquake that's could happen in 30 seconds or in 300 years. Seriously, they don't know when, but we're overdue for it, and according to the native lore, when it happens, it's rough. It happens about every 200 years, and we're 300 years in. Yeah.
So I lived in Florida for a long time, and my friend worked for essentially the county, the state, and he works in emergency management. And the one thing, after nearly a decade in Florida that shook me to my core, he's like, listen, have supplies for a week, because guess what, no help is coming. I'm like, what do you mean no help's coming? That's your job. He's like, no, plan for having enough supplies that you're not going to be helped by anyone for a week. I was just like,
no, it's true. Yeah. Because they have to get organized. They have to figure out what the needs are. They got to get their people there. I mean, it's not, yeah, it takes time. Okay. Be aware, just in a broader sense, of the grief within your communities. That it may mean that people will not follow through with their obligations, right? The person who's supposed to bring the cakes and ale may forget. Or they have a tendency to overwork themselves, and they're going to be in charge of every single ritual. Okay. Be aware that both of those things are true, and both of those are symptoms of grief. They may have unexpectedly large reactions to things that don't seem consequential. Okay? Like, I was going to make brownies for the bake sale, why am I always ignored? Okay, wow. Let's take a step back. Let's think about this. You know, and then think about how you can approach this person. Maybe this person needs to go outside and sit under a tree, or maybe they need to talk for a while. Okay, you know the person better than I do. And also, when it is you, if you find yourself getting really, really angry because somebody else made the brownies for the bake sale, wow, this might be my grief wearing a mask of brownies. Let me just take a minute. I think I need to sit with this. Okay? All right. It may be the role of the spiritual leader to recognize that this person is still grieving and to talk to them and let them know that you see them. Okay? Encourage them to get help when they need it. If they're finding that they're not following through with things, instead of criticizing them or being angry with them, perhaps it's time to discuss reorganizing capacity and saying, I know you like to do this, but we do need someone to do it, and you're going through a difficult time right now, so we're going to ask that you take a break from this and let's focus on your healing. You're still welcome, we still love you, and no one's mad at you. And it still needs to be done, so why don't you take a break and you can come back and do it whenever you're ready, okay? That can be a hard thing for the leader to say, it's a hard thing for the grieving person to hear, but it's ultimately on the leader to make sure it's not always going to be in the griever's best interest. If you're like, I forgot the cakes and ale again, just don't say anything, right? If it happens one time, sure, but if it continues to happen, then it's time to reorganize the responsibilities. I think I already covered some of this. Oh, okay, yes. Systems to implement before a loss. Make sure that you, within your coven, or your again, using the word coven, but you may not have that. What is the chain of action if a community member loses someone? What is it we're going to do to support people? Also, try to continue having some death salons or grief salons where people talk about how they personally prefer to be supported when they're grieving. There are some people that want to be left completely alone. Like, if you find out I've lost someone, don't call me, don't text me, I don't want to hear from you. You know, I would still send them a card, right? But this person still, it's good to know when we're like, listen, Sally is someone, she has said when she is in loss, she needs space. So let us not bombard her, but let us maybe pick one person just to check on her periodically, make sure she's okay. And somebody else may say, I don't really know. Or somebody else may say, I'm someone who talks and processes out loud. I'm going to need some ears. Okay? And then also be mindful that what we think we're like when we're grieving is rarely how we are when we're grieving. Yeah. Okay. So also being understanding someone's personal wishes and have an open discussion about whether someone has. Make sure we know each other as what our preferences are around last rites. Like I'm in the broom closet. I don't want my parents to know. It's fine. They can do whatever. But you know. Or someone say, listen, please do something for me. If my parents won't let you come in and do a ceremony for me, do one on your own. Do a circle outside the funeral home. I'm definitely going to want my great-great-aunts to, be horrified at my death. That kind of thing. Find out what these people's last wishes are. But also really crucial is giving people regular rituals. Samhain is a great time in which people can honor their own grief, and practices for people to be in grief together. Consider allocating specific songs you sing during these grief rituals and keeping them consistent, because just sometimes by hearing that specific song can open up the grief in someone, hearing that specific song. I don't want to be able to get through all of these things. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. I always... What does she always do this? This happened yesterday, too. So I had a couple of other slides about things. I apologize because I want to leave some room for Q&A, but I do also want to say these are the books that I have on goddesses, and also Tarot for One, and then also my book, Sacred